Hi, everybody. I'm Clint Peck with Beef Magazine. We're here this morning with Eric Smith, who's joining us from his ranch near Reform, Alabama. Eric, we've asked you to be here to talk about sustainability in the beef business and how it's changed or maybe been redefined over the last couple decades, and how you view cattle ranching from about 30,000 feet at this point in the evolution of the beef industry. Appreciate you being with us this morning, Eric. Kind of before we dive into the heart of our discussion, can you give a little backstory of you in the cattle ranching business and in the beef industry?
Hey, good morning, Clint, and thank you for inviting me. I grew up on a small family farm like a lot of people did back in the late 60s and early 70s. And my mother and father both had off-farm jobs, and we had a small operation, and I enjoyed doing that, being with animals, being with cattle. I grew up then around some stockyards, and I went to Ole Miss for college and played football there. And when I got ready to graduate, I had to choose between a corporate job in business or coming back and trying to start my own operation. And I chose that, and we grew from a small cow-calf operation into a larger stocker group. So today we run a lot of stockers. We graze in the wintertime along the coast, so we're the winter crop for farmers. And okay, we've been involved in the industry for a long time.
All right. Sounds good. All right. So, Eric, you stated a while back on a podcast that the hard work does not anymore guarantee success in the cattle business. You said there's a difference between providing a living and being profitable. Where were you going with that when you put together that podcast?
That podcast was part of the Common Ground Summit. And where I was talking about, that summit focuses on smaller producers, transition of older farmers and ranchers going out of the industry and new people coming in. And where I was thinking with that was a lot of operations aren't large enough to provide a living for their families. So they don't have the numbers either in acreage or in cattle numbers to just do that solely, and they have an off-farm job. A lot of the people who have those off-farm jobs have some acreage that they either got when they bought a little piece of land or they inherited from family, and they want to be in the cattle industry. They can stay in the industry, but if they have to take money from their personal jobs or their full-time jobs, there's a good chance that they won't stay. And what we're looking for as an industry and as a group is some of the tools that would make those smaller producers, part-time producers, viable into the future. We all know that the average herd size is, nationwide under 50. That number may have changed a little bit, but it's still small. And that obviously would not be a herd size big enough to make a living.
Right. It kind of brings back when I was a kid growing up. I mean, we had a small farm and ranch, and my mom sold Avon, and my dad worked part-time as a deputy sheriff in eastern Yellowstone County. And you look around and all the people that I remember growing up, somebody always had a little bit of off-farm income. They were somebody worked in the courthouse. Maybe the wife worked in the courthouse part-time, or worked in town, or did something to bring in a little extra income. So I wonder if that really hasn't changed in 40 or 50 years, Eric.
You're right, Glenn. My mother sold Tupperware, so it was a similar situation. There's always been that need for off-farm jobs or something there that generate a little money. This isn't the subject of our topic today, but a lot of those secondary jobs that people had have disappeared. So NAFTA took a lot of them away that were good jobs for local little people.
Right. All right. Well, let's circle back around to the Common Ground Summit. Um, about a month, 6 weeks ago, we had Turk Stovall on, and Turk kind of gave us the hot off the press view of the Common Ground Summit. Kind of since then, there's been some contention in the cattle business, and maybe some confusion about what the Common Ground Summit really was, and sort of where you all are going with the Common Ground Summit, and it's been a little bit contentious at times, especially with some of the things going on in the cattle industry. Um, there's even been confusion that Common Ground Summit was an NCBA effort, and that there's some sort of maybe subterfuge or insidious effort with regard to the Common Ground Summit. It's really gotten skewed. And I guess, first of all, how'd that sentiment evolve? And first, is there any connection to the Common Ground Summit and NCBA? And then we'll go from there.
Sure. I mentioned before that I grew up in livestock markets. And so I've always seen the value of the local auction markets and their reputation and the ability that they had to communicate with producers. Because of that, I've stayed active in the industry, and through friendships with people in LMA, I've had an opportunity to see how they still work. Right. Because of that, LMA invited a group of producers from around the country to come together to try to find some solutions to keep the cattle industry viable and small producers in business, and just all of the things we've already talked about, and that I'm sure Turk talked about on the show before. There has been some confusion that's gone along with it, and it didn't happen initially. It was a little later on, and I'm friends with a lot of people throughout the industry, and some of the people that are having some concerns that the Common Ground Summit is not really what it is. I'll be honest with you, there is no subterfuge here. This is people that really have solid, good concerns. They're interested in the country. They're interested in food security. They're interested in families. And in our summary of the Common Ground Summit, on one of the bullet points, the word sustainable was used. Probably, in retrospect, maybe we could have used a different word, but there was no tie in there with any other group. Over the years, and I've served on committees with some of the people who voice concerns, and they're good people. They're ranch people, and they're concerned about the industry too. But they're certain that there's something evil going on behind the doors that's not there. Sustainability is a word that I really dislike. I dislike it because it's been kidnapped or taken away from an average meaning. In the beginning, and the thing that got people stirred up was we were having outside parties that didn't trust what we were doing, and industry somewhere along the way says, well, let's let this word be something that we can use that would convince consumers and the other public that we're keeping up with the times and we're using all the technologies there. And, in my world, it changes all the time. Technology changes, production methods change. And so for you to be sustainable, you change with those. But before I could be sustainable, I have to be survivable. So that's the word I use more often than not. And as I make those changes, if I don't make them, I sometimes wouldn't be surviving. Genetics has changed. The product mix we have has changed. We, have less packers than we've ever had. We fret about that a good bit of the time, that they're controlling more of our market. But I think it just got hijacked, Clint, and there was no intent behind that. And then it got tied into the Angus deal. So it's just miscommunication. I wish all of the people who were concerned about it and had negative things to say about it, would look at the overall picture and what we were really trying to accomplish. And if they would do that, I'm sure they would sign on with us because they're wanting the same things that we're wanting.
So I'm guessing that this hijacking, this background noise with regard to the Common Ground Summit has not deterred you and the group and the purpose of the Common Ground Summit. I'm guessing it hasn't deterred you from your mission.
Not at all. Not at all. The mission is solid and the mission is pure. And what we're trying to do is we're at a tipping point in this country. And it's all about how agriculture is viewed and used. And I think we all struggle against the same things. We all have an independent streak among us. Everybody wants to think that if we continue to hold out, we'll continue to be viable together. Certainly, we don't want a vertical industry. We've seen how that has worked in other places. And we're to the point now where that's a possibility, not as vertical as some of the other protein groups, but
right.
With the high cost of production and lack of cash in some instances, it's a little bit more of an issue, the possibility of vertical, and I'm opposed to that. So I think the core mission of the Common Ground Summit is right where we were.
Good. Okay.
You asked about it being an NCBA organization. It's absolutely not an NCBA-driven organization at all. It's an LMA-driven organization. So, and then it becomes industry-driven.
Right. So the elephant in the room has been some accusations out there, and a lot of this is on social media, which is a really easy way to make accusations without having to back them up. But the accusations are that there's some tie between Common Ground Summit and the noise that's been created over the American Angus Association and Angus Genetics Inc. over the Bezos Earth Fund and the proposed research on methane production in beef cattle. Again, was there any link at all between what you all are trying to accomplish in the Common Ground Summit and this whole Angus Bezos Earth Fund controversy?
Absolutely not, Clint. You know there's no tie in there. What probably kicked that off is there's some possibly board members and the CEO of the Angus Association was a part of the Common Ground Summit, and nobody apologizes for that. LMA doesn't apologize for the people they invited. They invited people who had concerns and possibly some good ideas about things to do in the future. If I had been and I don't know the story, and so I see the social media blurbs and bursts about it too, and I see the same thing everybody else sees. Number one is I wouldn't like it to join anything to do with Bezos and any of their organizations, and I wouldn't like to have their mandates, and I don't want to be linked to methane emissions, and I don't want anything that says I'm a part of the big problem. We have emissions. I mean, there's no doubt about it. We had emissions back when we had a lot more cattle. We've got a shrinking cattle herd. Our impact is less and less all the time. Anybody that thinks the world isn't changing isn't looking. I mean, we got a much larger population, and to provide for them, obviously we probably are creating, not we as a cattle industry, but the world is creating, some emissions. And our portion of that is tiny. Had I been probably an Angus board member, I would have never gone along with it. And I don't support it. And Common Ground has absolutely nothing to do with it.
I guess that's the point, is that the link between Common Ground and actually the Bezos Earth Fund project and even NCBA. Common Ground Summit appeared to me to be pretty independent with regard to their deliberations and their conclusions. Which then, are you seeing any movement with regard, sort of politically, socially, with regard to some of those things those bullet points that you all created in the Common Ground Summit. Are you seeing some movement on that, Eric?
Clear we are. I was at a conference yesterday and spoke about the Common Ground Summit, and quite a few people signed on to I want to call it a petition or whatever it is, but we're collecting names and signatures of people who are in support of that. I certainly would invite anybody that listens to this podcast to go to the Common Ground Summit. There's a website that you can go there. You can read the bullet points. You can see the in-depth discussions we had. We've got recordings of it. Turk has been on your show and has done a nice job laying out the background behind it. Anybody within the LMA's group would be glad to talk about it. And we're getting movement. We've got to have, nobody wants government interference. That would be one of those roadblocks that I was talking about earlier, regulations, right. All of those things.
Death tax.
As any industry, you've got to have some government support. And that's one of the things that we've reached out to some friends in Congress. And if we get enough support behind it, some of the things we enacted or suggested possibly could be enacted. We're going to have some kind of change so that as we transition land in this country, that it's not all going to development or recreation or something else that it can stay in production and not penalize the rancher who spent his whole life building up that as his retirement.
And that's why I was going to mention the death tax, and maybe there's some movement with regard to those taxes and those transition of family properties.
You're right, and that's always one of the, the bigger points that's there. And we feel like we've been taxed and overtaxed in this country. Oftentimes we're taxed on items that we've already been paid in taxes on. And I realize there's necessity to some level, but in the current environment, we have taken away some of those services that we thought were redundant and wasteful spending, but it's a big government, and there's a lot of taxes that go into it and a lot of spending that goes there that in a ranch and farm situation, we don't have that money and we can't pass those costs on, and we question a lot of what government does.
So we wrap our arms around this concept of sustainability, and from what I'm getting from you, Eric, is that it really isn't anything particularly mysterious or new. It's just trying to keep people on the ranches and keep cattle alive and keep those feeder cattle, those stocker cattle rolling off the ground and into the system. It hasn't changed a whole lot.
And the problems haven't really changed either, Clint. I mean, it's always been hard to make a living in agriculture, and it's been hard to keep the next generation engaged. I'm a perfect example. My wife and I started at a small operation, and we've built it into a very large one now. I've got 3 sons. They're all ranch raised. I'm as proud of them as anybody could possibly be. They all work away from the ranch today and won't come back. They won't run the ranch. They'll own it, and they'll probably own other ranches, and they're knowledgeable. But their other jobs are in their chosen careers, and their dream is not my dream is not their dream.
Right.
And so I don't think it's right to force that onto the next generation, but there will be somebody out there who will want to do what I do, and I've got to figure out a way that they can access either my operations or other operations like mine around the country. And
that's the key, is keeping these operations alive, keeping those cattle on the land.
Sure.
So, well, Eric,
before we go off,
go ahead.
One of the things we talk about is we get so hung up on some of the terminology. And the sustainable word is certainly part of that. And when it was first devised, there were people who made careers out of telling me what was sustainable. It wasn't necessary. It's not necessary today. We're doing a good job in animal agriculture. I think the more unified we are, the stronger we are. Some of those other catchphrases would be source and age. Source and age was popular right during BSE, but it's no longer. It rolls off your tongue, and people who want to sound impressive often say something and say source and age, but it doesn't really mean much today. So sustainable would be another word that would be, in my mind, hijacked for whatever side of the issue you want to be on.
Well, I appreciate it, Eric. We probably need to wrap up. So thank you so much for your time, Eric, for being on here and for your work in the cattle industry, throughout whatever avenues you're working on. And we'll keep in touch. And again, thank you very much for being with us today, Eric.
Thank you
for Beef Magazine. I'm Clint Peck.